Show a nightmare how I exposed a 100K scam in my neighborhood. They say the American dream is owning your own home. Well, let me tell you, that dream turns into a nightmare real quick when you're dealing with a self-proclaimed HOA queen who thinks she owns everything she can see, including your front lawn. Imagine paying dues for 10 years to a woman who doesn't even have the legal right to run a lemonade stand, let alone an HOA. And the best part, she thought she could bully me like everyone else. Spoiler alert, she picked the wrong neighbor. When my wife and I bought our little slice of paradise in 2023, a tidy ranch house just outside the city limits, we had one golden rule: no HOA. We double-checked the paperwork, scoured the listings, and when we found this neighborhood, we thought we hit the jackpot. Quiet, mature trees, friendly retirees, no monthly dues or nosy board members telling me how tall my grass could be, or so we thought. About a week after we moved in, while I was still figuring out which switch controlled the porch light, there was a knock on the door. Standing there was a woman in her mid-50s, platinum hair, lacquered into place, a clipboard in one hand and a smug smile in the other. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she chirped. "I'm the president of the HOA." My wife and I exchanged a look. We were told this neighborhood doesn't have an HOA, I said cautiously. She chuckled like I had just told her the earth was flat. "Oh, sweetie," she said, patting the clipboard. "It's informal. We just keep things orderly around here. Here's your packet. First year dues are $300 payable by the end of the month." $300 for what? A welcome to the neighborhood casserole. I took the packet, smiled politely, and closed the door. Then I spent the next 2 hours reading every word she had printed off. There were fines for leaving your trash cans out, assessments for not trimming your hedges to regulation height, and my personal favorite, a noise disturbance fee if your lawnmower was too loud. If there was an Olympic event for petty tyranny, this woman would have brought home gold for America. Still, I figured maybe the neighbors went along with it just to avoid drama. We were new, and frankly, we had bigger things to worry about than HOA shenanigans. That changed 2 weeks later. We had 2 massive oak trees in our backyard. One branch was hanging dangerously over the sidewalk. Out of pure concern for safety and not wanting to pay a lawsuit if someone got flattened, I hired a professional arborist to trim it back. They did a fantastic job and temporarily stacked the cut wood neatly near the sidewalk to haul away the next weekend. Enter Karen. She pulled into my driveway like she was reenacting a police chase, rolled down her window and barked, "You can't leave debris on community property. Move it now." My wife tried to explain that I was out of town and we planned to clear it within days, but Karen was having none of it. "I'll have the city ticket you," she screeched, revving her engine for dramatic effect. My wife, bless her, didn't want a scene. So she spent the next 2 hours by herself moving logs the size of Labradors into our backyard. When I got home and heard what happened, I wasn't just mad, I was motivated. Because here's the thing Karen thought she was dealing with: another sheep in her little HOA pasture. She didn't know she had just poked a very particular bear, a bear who happened to have a brother working in the county records office, in a deep personal hatred of bullies. And that's when I decided if Karen wanted a war over community rules, I'd show her what real rules looked like. When I say Karen ran the neighborhood like a medieval duchess, I'm not exaggerating. After the great log-moving incident, things quieted down for maybe a week, I thought. Maybe she got the message. Maybe that little confrontation was enough to make her back off. Spoiler alert. It wasn't. First came the letters. Type printed and slid into our mailbox, which, by the way, is a federal offense. Unless you're the mailman. But that's a fight for another day. Your hedges exceed the community's preferred height of 3-5 feet. Failure to trim them will result in a $50 fine. Preferred by who? Karen and her imaginary HOA committee of 1. My wife and I looked at each other and chuckled. Preferred height. What is this? The Miss America pageant for shrubs. I ignored it. That's when the garbage bin saga began. One Tuesday morning trash day, I left our bin out like everyone else. Normally the city picks it up between 10 a.m. and noon, but that day I got held up at work and didn't roll the bin back until about 3 p.m. By the time I got home, another letter was taped, no duct tape to my front door. Trash receptacles must be removed within 30 minutes of collection, or a $75 community disruption fine will apply. Community disruption, lady. The only thing disrupting this community is you. Soon I started hearing from neighbors. Quiet, cautious conversations at the mailbox. "Hey, have you been getting fines from Karen too?" We didn't want to say anything, but she's been charging us for years. She said if we didn't pay, she'd have our yard liens processed. Liens? Karen was threatening liens. For context, a lien is a legal claim against your property for unpaid debts. Real HOA liens require court filings, paperwork, and legitimate authority, Karen. She had a clipboard and delusions of grandeur. One neighbor, a sweet retired teacher named Martha, whispered, "I've paid over $3,000 to her since I moved here. I didn't want trouble." That hit me hard. Karen wasn't just being annoying. She was exploiting people, especially the elderly, the quiet, the vulnerable. Folks who just wanted peace and thought it was easier to pay than to fight. That's when I knew. This wasn't about hedges or trash bins. This was a scam, and Karen had gotten away with it for far too long. Out of curiosity, I asked Karen one day, "Hey, who else is on the HOA board?" She paused, calculating. "Oh, well, it's a rotating board. I represent them publicly because nobody else likes paperwork." Uh-huh. That's like saying your invisible friend co-signs your mortgage. But to cover my bases, I asked a few more neighbors. Nobody had ever been to a board election. Nobody knew of a treasurer. Nobody had even seen meeting minutes, which any real HOA must legally provide upon request. When I politely emailed Karen requesting the latest meeting notes, she replied, "Board documents are confidential. Trust is essential in our community." Translation: I have no documents and I'm hoping you will back off. By fall 2023, I had officially become the HOA's public enemy. Number one, Karen spread rumors like wildfire. "He's trying to ruin our neighborhood." They're freeloaders who refuse to follow rules. "His wife leaves the garbage bins out on purpose." I'd take garbage bin, rebel as a badge of honor at this point. But the more she pushed, the more allies I gained. Quiet neighbors started forwarding me letters, emails, even text messages Karen had sent threatening them. My wife set up a private Facebook group called Real Neighbors of Willow Creek. Within a week, over 30 households joined. Turns out almost everyone had a Karen story. One neighbor, Tom, said Karen fined him $100 because his grandson's bike was left on the lawn longer than community guidelines allowed. Community guidelines written by who, Moses? Now remember when I mentioned my brother working in county records. Over Thanksgiving, between bites of turkey, I finally told him the whole saga. He didn't even blink. "Send me the subdivision name and her full name. I'll check the HOA filings first thing Monday." That Monday, he called me. "You're not going to believe this. There's no active or historical HOA filing for your subdivision. Not now. Not ever." Boom, the scam wasn't just suspected, it was confirmed. But I didn't stop there. My brother helped me file a formal records request with the County Planning and Zoning Office. That's where we found another gem, the green space. Karen kept calling community property. It was classified as public right-of-way, managed by the County Roads Division. Not by Karen. Not by any HOA. That meant her no debris finds her threats, her authority all imaginary. Armed with the facts, I didn't immediately confront Karen. Oh no, I'm a fan of strategic timing. First, I gathered written statements from at least 15 neighbors who had paid her dues. I kept records of every fine threat and letter she sent me. My wife printed everything out and organized it into a binder thicker than a church hymnal. Next, we scheduled a community update meeting at the local library's public room. We invited every resident in the subdivision. And Karen. Oh, she RSVP'd with a confident, "I'll be there to maintain order." Perfect, as the date approached. Karen tried one last power play. She hand-delivered a final notice to our door. Due to ongoing non-compliance and community disruption, the HOA will begin proceedings to place a lien on your property, effective January 15, 2024. Cute but illegal. My wife and I smiled, slipped the letter into our growing binder of evidence, and waited patiently for meeting day. If Karen thought she was about to reinforce her reign of terror, she was in for the rudest awakening of her life. If you mess with the bull, you get the horns. That's something my granddad used to say whenever a bully finally got what was coming to them. As the date of our neighborhood meeting drew closer, I kept hearing his voice in my head. And Karen. She was about to meet both horns. The library's community room could hold 50 people. We had 36 homes in the subdivision. By the night of the meeting, nearly every seat was filled. People who had nodded politely at me for months were now greeting me like an old friend. A few even brought cookies. I guess taking on a tyrant makes you popular, real fast. Karen arrived fashionably late, clipboard in hand, pearls gleaming, her signature smug smile plastered across her face. She strutted in like a queen surveying her subjects. "I'm glad so many of you could attend," she announced loud enough to drown out the soft murmur of neighbors chatting. There have been troubling rumors spread by a certain household that have caused unnecessary panic. Unnecessary panic, tell that to the elderly couple who paid her $400 to $500 in dues over a decade. Karen wasted no time. Let me begin by assuring you, she said, the HOA has always acted in the community's best interest. I've maintained order-enforced standards and handled finances responsibly. Some neighbors nodded either out of habit or fear, but others exchanged skeptical glances. We've seen what happens in neighborhoods without strong leadership, Karen continued. Property values drop, lawns become overgrown, crime increases. She pulled out a few papers, no doubt printed from the internet, showing case studies of neighborhoods that failed without an HOA. Fear, her favorite tactic. But this time it wasn't working. The mood in the room was shifting. People weren't buying it anymore. I stood up slowly, holding the binder my wife and I had assembled. Thank you, Karen, I said. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to address a few points. By all means, she replied, arms crossed confidently. Transparency is key. Oh, Karen, you're going to regret saying that. First, I began. Many of us have paid dues for years. But when I requested copies of meeting minutes, election results, and financial reports which any HOA must legally provide, you said they were confidential. A few heads nodded. Some whispered, she told me the same thing. So I filed a public records request with the county. I held up the first document. There has never been at any time an officially registered HOA for this subdivision. The room went still. You could hear a pin drop. Karen's confident smile faltered. That's incorrect. The original developer formed an informal. Informal isn't legal, I interrupted. And even informal associations must register with the county if they collect dues or enforce rules. I flipped to the next page. Second, the so-called community property you've cited in fines and warnings. I held up a zoning map from the planning office. That's public right-of-way managed by the county. No private party, including an HOA, has authority over it. Now murmurs were spreading through the room. People were digging through their own paperwork. A few pulled out old letters Karen had sent them. Third, I continued. Here are statements from 15 households documenting fines and fees paid to you over the past 10 years. I laid the signed affidavits on the table. The total exceeds $100,000. Gasps, actual gasp. Karen's face went from confident to confused to downright terrified in under 30 seconds. This is a misunderstanding, she said quickly. These were voluntary contributions. Suggestions. With threats of liens, I asked, holding up one of her letters, failure to pay will result in property liens and possible foreclosure proceedings. Your words. Someone in the back, old Mr. Jensen, who rarely spoke at meetings, stood up and said loudly, she told me the same thing. Another neighbor added, me too. The dam had broken. Karen looked around, realizing her supporters had vanished, even her usual allies. The couple who always backed her in meetings were avoiding her gaze. I also consulted with an attorney. I said, since there's no legal HOA and no signed contracts, any dues collected under false pretenses could constitute fraud. My brother had even confirmed the possibility of class action litigation. Therefore, I'm advising all affected neighbors to join together in a legal claim to recover their payments. I'm also forwarding this documentation to the state's Consumer Protection Division. Karen's clipboard slipped from her fingers, papers scattered on the floor. This is harassment, she shrieked. You're turning the community against me. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The community had already turned itself. Karen grabbed her purse, scooped up whatever paper she could, and marched toward the exit. No one stopped her. No one spoke. The silence was louder than any words. As the door closed behind her, the room erupted, not in chaos, but in relief. Neighbors hugged. Some wiped tears. Martha, the retired teacher, squeezed my hand. Thank you. We didn't know how to fight her. Now we do, I said. That night, our new neighborhood Facebook group exploded with messages. I'm in for the lawsuit. I have all my old payment receipts. Finally, we're free. By the end of the week, over 30 households had joined the legal claim. Karen's attempts to intimidate neighbors into silence failed miserably. I also filed a formal complaint with the state's real estate licensing board. Turns out Karen was a licensed agent. Emphasis on was her license, suspended pending investigation. Her control gone. If you think this was wild, wait till you hear what happened when the lawsuit hit the court. There's an old saying in the South, You can shear a sheep many times, but skin it only once. Karen, she'd been shearing this neighborhood for a decade. Now it was time for the skinning. Within 2 weeks of the meeting, our newly formed neighborhood alliance had hired a law firm. Not just any firm, Mitchell & Barnes specialists in HOA, abuse, and fraud litigation. They'd taken down corrupt boards across 3 counties. This wasn't their first HOA rodeo. Our lead attorney, Ms. Patterson, reviewed the evidence binder and smiled. This, she said, tapping the stack of affidavits, is the legal equivalent of a sledgehammer. She filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of 32 households. Claims included fraudulent collection of fees, misrepresentation of authority, threats of illegal liens, emotional distress for several elderly residents. We weren't just asking for a refund. We were seeking treble damages, triple the amount Karen had wrongfully collected. Over $300,000. When Karen was served the court papers, she tried to rally what few allies she had left. It's a witch hunt. She cried on Nextdoor, in Facebook groups. They're jealous of my leadership. But nobody answered her call. Her usual defenders silent. A few even messaged me privately. We were scared. We never really agreed with her. Karen eventually scraped together a defense attorney, a guy named Russo, who rumor had it specialized in traffic tickets and landlord evictions against Mitchell and Barnes, bringing a butter knife to a gunfight. During the discovery phase, both sides had to provide evidence. Karen submitted a flimsy spreadsheet listing supposed voluntary contributions. No contracts, no meeting minutes, no financial disclosures. But then came the kicker. Our lawyers subpoenaed Karen's personal bank records. Guess where the HOA dues had gone? Not into maintenance or community projects. Not into a neighborhood fund. No, they funded Karen's vacations, spa memberships, and a brand new Lexus SUV. When the evidence was presented, even her attorney looked like he wanted to slide under the table. Your Honor, Russo stammered during a pretrial hearing. My client believed she was acting in the community's best interest. The judge, a no-nonsense Vietnam vet named Judge Holloway, leaned forward. Sir, best interests don't usually involve all-inclusive resorts in Cancun. The courtroom chuckled. Even the bailiff smiled. During the trial, several neighbors testified. Martha, the retired teacher, told the court how Karen threatened her with foreclosure if she didn't pay. Tom recounted how his grandson's lemonade stand was fined $50 for unauthorized commerce. Mr. Jensen, nearly 80, described sleepless nights worrying about the liens Karen threatened. By the time my turn came, the jury was already glaring at Karen like she'd keyed their cars in the parking lot. Your Honor, I said, holding up one of Karen's fine notices. This wasn't leadership, it was extortion, disguised as community care. Karen didn't testify. Her attorney advised against it. Probably wise. Probably. But when the prosecution presented the final slide, a pie chart showing over $98,000 in personal luxury expenses funded by our dues, Karen burst into tears. They wanted me to keep order, she sobbed. I deserve compensation for my time. The judge didn't blink. Ms. Carter, leadership is not a license to steal. After 4 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 3 hours. They found Karen liable on all counts: fraud, misrepresentation, emotional distress. Damages awarded $312,000 to the class action plaintiffs, plus court costs, plus an injunction barring Karen from holding any future HOA-related role or managing community funds for life. When the verdict was read, there was no cheering, just a wave of quiet, overwhelming relief. Martha clutched my wife's hand. It's over, she whispered. It's finally over. But the story didn't end there. Remember that complaint I filed with the State Real Estate Licensing Board? They'd been watching the trial closely. A week after the verdict, they issued their own ruling. Karen's real estate license was permanently revoked, not suspended, not conditional revoked. She could no longer sell homes, manage properties, or legally represent any housing-related entity. She wasn't just out of power. She was out of the industry. With Karen out of the picture, the neighborhood began to heal. Our Facebook group evolved from Real Neighbors of Willow Creek into an official neighborhood association, voluntary, transparent, and legally compliant. No mandatory dues, no fines, just neighbors looking out for each other. We even hosted a community BBQ. Someone brought a cake decorated with the words, "Freedom tastes sweet." If there's one thing I took away from this nightmare, it's this: bullies thrive on fear and silence. Karen held our neighborhood hostage for years because people were too afraid or too polite to challenge her. But once the silence broke, so did her power. Justice may be slow. My grandfather once told me, But when it arrives, it doesn't knock. It kicks the door down. That door, Karen never saw it coming. If you think that was satisfying, just wait till you hear what happened to Karen's house next. Some people think justice means seeing your enemy dragged out in handcuffs. I disagree. Real justice, it's watching them destroy themselves slowly, painfully, and without anyone left to blame but themselves. After the trial, Karen vanished from public view. Her Lexus disappeared from the driveway. The well-manicured hedges she once obsessively policed grew wild. No more clipboard patrols, no more duct tape notices, no more fake fines stuffed into mailboxes. We heard through the grapevine she tried to list her house for sale. One problem, with the lawsuit judgment against her, any proceeds from the sale would go straight to paying off what she owed the neighborhood buyers backed out. Repeatedly, apparently. Former HOA president sued for fraud. Doesn't look great in a property disclosure. By spring 2025, her once pristine home sat abandoned. Weeds overtook the flower beds Karen had once fined neighbors for neglecting. A faded "for sale by owner" sign leaned crookedly in the front yard. Windows gathered dust. The same neighbors she used to bully now walk past her property without so much as a glance. Some even joked we should install a "no bullies allowed" sign. Eventually, the county foreclosed. Karen couldn't pay the damages, the court fees, or even the basic property taxes she'd neglected. The home went to public auction. But here's where the story takes a turn. Not of revenge, but of redemption. Our neighborhood association, still fresh from our legal victory, pooled funds and made a bid. We won for a fraction of the market value. We didn't buy Karen's house out of spite. We bought it to turn the final page of this chapter. The property became the Willow Creek Community Center, a space for neighborhood meetings, a safe place for kids' events, a quiet garden for our seniors. Ironically, the very house Karen used as a throne became a monument to true community leadership, cooperation, transparency, and fairness. We even kept one thing from Karen's reign, her old wooden clipboard. It now hangs in the community center hallway with a plaque. Let this remind us, power without accountability will always crumble. Rumors say she moved 2 counties over, tried to start fresh, but you can't outrun your own reputation, especially when Google exists. Last we heard, she was renting a small duplex. No HOA, no community leadership roles. Just another face in the crowd. Maybe, just maybe, she learned something. But I wouldn't bet my hedges on it. Looking back, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel pride. Pride that we ordinary homeowners stood up not just for ourselves, but for what was right. Pride that we turned a neighborhood divided by fear into a united front. Pride that we didn't stoop to Karen's level, even when it would have been easy. And most importantly, we showed that bullies only win when good people stay silent. But when good people speak up together, they can reclaim not just their homes, but their dignity. If you're watching this and facing your own HOA nightmare, remember, know your rights. Document everything. Find allies. Don't be intimidated by fake authority. Justice might take time. It might feel impossible. But trust me, when it arrives, it's worth every minute of the fight. If you think this was the end, let's just say the HOA world still had one more surprise in store for me. They say every neighborhood has a Karen. Some have 2. Ours had the queen of them all, but even queens can fall. And when they do, they leave behind a lesson that's worth more than any courtroom victory. First, bullies thrive in silence. Karen counted on people being too afraid, too busy, or too polite to push back. That's how she built her empire of fear, one little fine, one little threat, one little lie at a time. If just one person had stood up 5 years earlier, maybe the damage wouldn't have gone so far. Second, knowledge is power. Karen wasn't counting on someone who knew how to read a deed, pull zoning records, or heaven forbid, actually call the county offices instead of blindly obeying a clipboard. Third, community beats tyranny. No one can fight alone. I didn't defeat Karen by myself. It took Martha Tom, Mr. Jensen, and 30 other brave homeowners. Ordinary people who had enough. We turned from strangers into allies, from victims into victors. If you ever find yourself dealing with petty fines that don't make sense, threats of liens or legal action without proper documents, a president who can't provide meeting minutes or bylaws, don't ignore the red flags. Document everything. Ask questions and gather your community before it's too late. Oh, and that clipboard. We kept it hanging in the Willow Creek Community Center, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Power without accountability will always crumble. Karen taught us that lesson the hard way. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with a rogue HOA or a Karen in your neighborhood? Maybe it was a petty parking fine. Maybe it was something much worse. Drop your story in the comments below. Let's share, support each other, and make sure no one feels alone facing HOA bullies again. And if you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because I've got plenty more HOA tales where this came from. Trust me, Karen was just the beginning. See you in the next story. And remember, justice might be slow, but it never forgets.